Hello, everyone. My name is Carla Martin. I am the Executive Director of the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute, as well as a lecturer based at Harvard University in the Department of African and African American Studies. For approximately 10 years, I have been conducting academic research on the global politics of the cocoa and chocolate supply chain. In addition, I've been engaged in applied work, bringing education and research, disseminating information to stakeholders in that supply chain for the past 4 years. And we at FCCI have been tracking the COVID-19 impact and hoping to better understand the way in which it is affecting small chocolate businesses, eventually also to better understand the way in which it is affecting specialty cacao producers. And we approached this in a multi-part way. What I'd like to discuss with all of you today is a flash poll that we conducted, which we administered over the past week and received responses from well over 100 small chocolate businesses in order to try to better understand the impact on those businesses. Now, the reason that academics engage in things like flash polls is these are a tool that help us to better understand quickly and efficiently the impact on a subset, the group of people that respond, essentially. It may be that when we can conduct flash polls like this, we hear more from people who are in acute distress. That could be a potential bias in the type of data that we get. However, that is not a particular worry in conducting a flash poll like this, because the idea is if we've surveyed over 100 people, heard those responses, then we can engage in a response that supports those 100 people. Either way, some benefit has come from this poll. Also, I can tell you from looking at the data, from looking through it with colleagues, that we believe that some of the findings in this poll are generalizable to a larger group of small chocolate businesses, and I'll share how we think that's possible in just a moment. We're using this flash poll to complement ethnographic data that we're collecting. So the flash poll is quantitative, ethnographic data is qualitative. That means that we have been having conversations with different small chocolate businesses, tracking what they're seeing either via e-newsletters, social media, WhatsApp groups. In other words, trying to understand at their own narrative level what the impact is on their businesses. And these two methodologies complement one another to help us to really have a better grip on what's occurring right now in the industry. Before I go into talking about the data, I'd like to acknowledge the team of the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute who've been supporting me in pulling all of this together quickly. I'd also like to acknowledge our colleagues at the Specialty Coffee Association who had an early conversation with us about this poll and who have actually adapted the FCCI poll and are currently administering it to the specialty coffee community. And I'd like to thank a number of academic colleagues who know who they are, who have looked at this data in aggregate to support us in making sure that our analysis is fair and balanced. So thank you to all of you for your support. I'd also like to thank the small chocolate businesses that took the time to respond to the poll. We're grateful for your trust, and we hope that our response in this current video will be helpful. We'll plan to write something up sharing more about this data as we can, and we have a number of other things in mind that we will implement as we receive responses to this first analysis of data that we're going to share with all of you. So thank you. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a slide deck right now that will take us through what we've actually found so far in the flash poll. So you will see here the slideshow, and I'm going to set this up so that you can see it well. Essentially, this is a flash poll conducted over the course of 1 week on coronavirus and its potential impacts on small chocolate businesses. And you will see here the first slide, we have had 125 companies total respond. In fact, we've since had several more respond, but we stopped looking at those responses so that we could analyze data and get this information out to you as soon as possible. If you are interested to complete the flash poll, please feel free to do that. The more data we have, the better, and we'll continue to go back to this data over time. So just to give you a sense of where these companies who have responded are from, 52.8% are from North America, 22.4% are from Europe, 9.6% are from Asia and Australia, and 15.2% are from South America and the Caribbean. This is not hugely different from the actual distribution of companies in the small chocolate business space. The vast majority of those companies are in North America, with smaller numbers in Europe, smaller numbers yet in Latin America, and even smaller numbers in Asia and Australia. So while this isn't exactly mapping onto it, we do feel that this represents pretty good global coverage overall. Now, we asked each organization to share with them their annual revenue. The reason for this is that it helps us to understand how legitimately small these companies are, and also to understand what acute financial distress might look like for them. All of the figures that you see displayed in this slide are in US dollars. So 43.2% of the companies that responded showed that their annual revenue is under $100,000. 17.6 are between the $100,000 and $250,000 range. 20% are between the $250,000 and $750,000 range. 16.8 are between the $750,000 and $2.5 million range. And then, of course, you can see that beyond 2.5 million or over 10 million are really quite small figures here. So these are legitimately small businesses that are responding, and we know using common sense that they are likely to have less flexibility, less liquidity in a moment of significant financial impact. We've also asked everyone in the poll to share with us what they believe is the impact on their organizations overall. And we asked them this in one question, but in two ways. So we're asking people, how has your business been impacted, or how do you expect it to be impacted? And that's because the way that this virus is moving around the world, there is sort of a ripple effect that impacts different communities at different times. Now, this is where the information gets very stark, and why we think it's so important that the industry work collectively to respond to support small chocolate businesses in this moment. 20% of these 125 organizations that responded described the impact or the potential impact as an existential threat, meaning that were the impacts to continue or to become more severe, they are likely to go out of business. 59.2% of businesses indicate that this has a significant impact, meaning that 80% of these businesses overall are describing a very significant to existential threat to their businesses. Now, we have a variety of different ways that we can understand the relative negativity versus potential positive impact on these businesses that I'll continue to explain as we go on. We also asked organizations, is your organization experiencing or anticipating a decrease in sales related to the coronavirus? And we asked people to please list the percent decrease and to estimate if possible. And this is where you can see again that decreases in sales are significant in many different categories of response. So 92% of respondents have said that they've experienced or anticipate experiencing at least a 25% sales decrease. 71% see the same, but a 50% sales decrease. 40% respondents say that they are experiencing or anticipate experiencing a 75% sales decrease, and 17% see a 90% sales decrease, a very significant sales decrease. And when we look at this data in individual responses and see some of the short answer responses that companies shared, we see that this impact comes from being required to, for example, in some cases, shutter their business because of shelter-in-place orders or closings of non-essential businesses in their communities. We see it as a result of a variety of other things, like just being required to shut down the business completely due to staff being sick or more. So there are really significant sales decreases happening here. But we also wanted to understand where were the sales decreases most significant, because of course, several of the companies that respond have diversified sales channels. So we looked at this impact on sales channels and we asked companies to indicate which have been most impacted. When it comes to sales to consumers in person, so B2C sales, but that require an in-person retail environment, a large number of companies have reported a significant decrease in those sales, and that goes through back to those reasons just described, like related to staff absences that have not allowed them to keep their business open as much, or to shelter in place or closures of non-essential business orders in their different communities that have virtually made their retail sales either significantly limited to or even up to impossible. We also see that B2C sales to consumers online sales have been impacted, but interestingly, most companies responding report a minimal change. There is a not insignificant amount of companies, about 25%, that say that they have seen a decrease in these online sales, and a small number of companies that say they have actually seen an increase in online sales. Most often, seeing that increase has been accompanied by action on the part of those companies to try to drive online sales during this period of financial instability and uncertainty. And another area where there has been a very large impact is in relation to sales to businesses, so B2B sales. We've seen a very significant decrease in sales, as only a small number of companies have reported that they've seen minimal change or significant increase in those sales to businesses. And so that's two major sales channels that have been very significantly impacted. And I can detail that in a bit more for you here, where you see that 87% of respondents have seen or anticipate a significant decrease in the channel sales to consumers in person. 28% of respondents have seen a significant decrease in the channel of business to consumer or direct to consumer sales online. And 79% of respondents have seen or anticipate a significant decrease in their business to business sales. So all of this, again, suggests that many of these companies are facing some kind of significant financial or potentially even existential threat at this moment. We also asked for companies to share with us some of the things that they've experienced or anticipate experiencing. This is partly to understand what companies currently impacted expect, but also because it can be educational or supportive for companies that haven't yet been impacted in their regions to determine how they might react. And you'll see here, 91% of respondents have seen or anticipate seeing reduced customer demand. That's in keeping with responses to the previous questions already discussed. 79% of respondents have seen a cancellation of events. 42% of respondents have seen increased and sustained staff absences. When they elaborate on this, they explain that this is often due to staff reporting illnesses or staff being immunocompromised and needing to stay home, such things like that. 30% of respondents have seen or anticipate seeing production issues. This is linked with staff absences or linked with forced business closure or shelter-in-place orders. 29% of respondents have seen a shortage of supplies. And I want to be very clear that when asked to elaborate on this, companies explained that the shortage of supplies has come down to a few different things. One is maybe a shortage of protective gear or cleaning supplies, which is something that is an issue in the cleaning supply and protective gear supply chain today. So it's natural that this would also be impacting small businesses. Another is a shortage of supplies because perhaps their cash flow has been so limited that they're unable to invest in the supplies that they currently need. It does not yet appear as though any of the businesses surveyed are experiencing their own raw materials supply chain interruptions. And I think it's very important to emphasize that this is not yet evidential of a supply chain crisis in cacao or in chocolate. In addition, 6% of respondents have seen an increased legal or insurance cost. And a lot of that is linked with maybe needing to cancel events, wanting to do right by employees, and a variety of different things related to these other categories already described here. Then finally, we were looking at different ways that organizations have responded or anticipate responding to the spread of coronavirus in their areas. And this was in the hopes of finding what are some of the best strategies that exist out there already, what are companies doing, what could they be doing, trying to support education and the dissemination of information on what might be best practices in a very fluid, unpredictable current situation. So 85% of respondents are staying informed via news media and updates from public health officials. That's very promising and is perhaps one of the most important ways that businesses can be getting the critical information that they need to act and to protect their businesses, their staff, and more. 78% of respondents have or are anticipating rescheduling or canceling events. 74% of respondents are implementing more rigorous cleaning procedures, also very important for the protection of the business, the employees, and of consumers. 69% of respondents have already or anticipate encouraging employees who feel sick to stay at home. 59% of respondents are already or anticipate increasing digital marketing efforts. And that is a very important area of movement right now, especially when businesses are reporting such significant decreases in their direct-to-consumer in-person sales. 34% of respondents have emailed or are anticipating emailing their newsletter specifically to talk about coronavirus preparedness. 33% are offering deals like free shipping on online orders. 33% are seeking additional financing, such as a loan. 31% of respondents are or anticipate implementing a remote work policy for employees who do not need to be on site. 31% are or anticipate changing in-person events to virtual events. And 30% of respondents are or anticipate moving sales entirely online. So I hope that that gives a sense of the different types of responses that companies have had. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but our suspicion is that it will nonetheless be helpful. And we have some suggestions based on the analysis of this, some of the short answer data that was shared in the flash poll that we think might be helpful. Okay, so looking at suggestions that have been offered by companies that have experienced, have had a kind of successful strategy that they implemented, some of the suggestions that we've seen across the board and that we would also make by looking at this flash poll are that there is room for increased response in a number of different areas here. One is in employee protections. There is not yet a lot that is being communicated about employee protections from different companies or actions that appear to be taken as have been reflected on this flash poll. Things that companies should be thinking about are paid sick leave for employees, policies about health and checking people's health, determining whether or not they are ill and should or could be at work. Whenever possible, allowing employees that can work from home to work from home, and then also investing when available in protective gear and cleaning supplies that will support those employees in working in an environment where there's less likelihood of exposure or less likelihood of them transmitting coronavirus to consumers. For those of you who are interested in looking at this from a food safety perspective, the Specialty Coffee Association Association held a webinar on Friday that is now available online, and that you should be able to access in order to try to understand how what was shared by the experts there might apply to small chocolate businesses. The other thing that we've seen is a real need for an increase in digital marketing efforts, for example, via online sales, via social media, via a newsletter. And the number one thing that was most communicated by the different companies filling out this survey is they felt the strategy that was working the best for them was communicating about how they're responding to coronavirus, communicating about how it is impacting their businesses, and more. And that communication is through different channels. One is directly to consumers via social media, via newsletters, and more. The other communication that people indicated that they're prioritizing is among other chocolate companies and among other small businesses in their communities as a way of seeking out different strategies and resources and so on. Now, there are a number of additional actions that need to be prioritized, and these are not necessarily specific to small chocolate businesses, but they are actions that will, if they are successful, be supportive of these small chocolate businesses overall. And there's two directions that people can go in for this. The first direction that people can go in is an institutional direction. That means working with, for example, in the United States, with local, state, and federal government to pressure elected officials to increase the amount of small business emergency support, to look at options like rent or mortgage abatement that would allow small businesses to keep their doors open, that would also support employees who might be either unemployed, facing reduced hours or more, to remain in their homes. It would also be to pressure elected officials to work toward increased or fast unemployment coverage, to look at different sales or food tax holidays, and to seek out the most appropriate medical response via Medicare for All, via for other means of making sure that everyone who can or should be tested can get tested and can also access Medicare or medical care in a way that will not put other people in danger or put themselves in financial jeopardy. Now, the difficult situation that different countries are currently facing is that, especially in Europe and in North America, there has been a delayed or even failed response on the part of national governments. And so what is happening is that many of these measures that could be protective of small businesses, of employees, or the now unemployed are not being implemented fast enough, and we can't actually be certain that they will be implemented at all. So beyond these institutional measures, which are essential and which we should be working toward, we also recommend that small chocolate businesses focus on community measures beyond the institutional. That might mean something like joining a local mutual aid network. Mutual aid networks have a long history. They're often volunteer-run initiatives that bring together communities right within the local area where they live. We at FCCI have all joined in our different communities mutual aid networks. And what it means is that we're now better connected than ever with the people that we live near, such that we can share resources, support people in accessing food if they're food insecure, support them in accessing medical care if they're not certain about how to access it, and more. And for any business, this is also an essential way of getting linked in with a community in a situation where the institutions might be failing or too slow to respond in an acute moment. Beyond this, community business networks, small business networks in individual communities may have more agile responses at this particular moment than different institutional entities. And so reaching out to small business networks in your local community might result in a quicker response than you can get from going to larger institutions. Reaching out to your best customers as a small chocolate business can also often be very effective in moments like this. They want for you to succeed. They're your best customers. They want for your business to survive in these difficult moments, and may have a variety of different resources that you wouldn't have previously considered asking them for, but that are essential and could make a significant difference in the short term for you and your business. So that's another area that people can look to their individual communities and seek out support. Now, related to all of this, I think it's important that people keep in mind that we're in a moment where things that were previously unimaginable have actually become almost acceptable in just a couple of weeks. To give you an example from Harvard, where I teach, it's a university where we do not cancel classes. There's very much a culture at Harvard of the show must go on no matter what. It is extremely rare that anything is shut down at the university. After September 11th, the university had very minimal interruption. After the Boston Marathon bombing, there was also extremely minimal interruption. We routinely have intense years of snow. People talk about the snowpocalypse of 2015 in the New England area, and the university had very minimal interruption as well. Yet 2 weeks ago, the university first declared that gatherings of over 150 people were strongly discouraged, which was thought at that moment to be completely impossible. And then just a few days later, evacuated the campus and sent all students home. We've moved to online teaching as much as we can. Staff are working from home. It's been a complete change, a complete cultural shock for this institution, but is something that has actually made clear that the initial measures that people implemented were found to be insignificant, thus leading to the measures that felt very extreme, but that were essential for the protection of the community. And small chocolate businesses are up against the same kind of challenges. Things that may have initially seemed completely impossible have now come to be seen as the only way that things can be done, or not even sufficient for protecting communities and ourselves from the coronavirus. So what I strongly recommend is that all of you remain as flexible as possible and as communicative as possible so that you can continue to be accepting and adapting to this situation. We at FCCI will be here working as hard as we can to be supportive. Our strengths are in education and in research. We have created a resource guide that will link all of you to resources that are available to support small businesses in this time. That's available online. We are exploring what might be appropriate second or follow-up flash polls that would help us to get a bit deeper into some of the data that I've shared here. And we've also partnered with Uncommon Cacao and Emily Mantooth at the Craft Chocolate Experience to try to catalyze a global collective action to support small businesses that we're calling the Stay Home with Chocolate Festival. This is open to anyone and everyone. We have contacted all of the organizers of chocolate festivals, of different events. If ever there was a moment for event organizers, for awards organizers, for educational organizations to come together and to support small businesses in trying to drive online sales, which is one area that is less impacted and where there is still some flexibility, this is it. This is now. And we hope that you all consider joining us for that. For more information, just visit stayhomewithchocolate.com. And to conclude, I would like to wish you all good health and safety. It's a difficult and unprecedented time. Things are very uncertain. This is a type of history that we are living that is not easy to understand as it happens. But the truth is, we have all of the tools that we need to work together as a community for our collective success. We know how to do these things. We must do it collectively in order to do it most effectively. And I personally look forward to doing that with all of you. Take good care of yourselves, and thank you.